All right. Here we go. Thank you, Harry. This is the show on 103.5 FM WNHH. And let me do the legals before we start. You're listening to the show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We're streaming live on TuneIn Radio and newhavenindependent.org. We're also streaming live video on Facebook Live. All you have to do is go to facebook.com, New Haven Independent, or just go to your own Facebook page and look us up. Today in the studio, I have with me the Reverend Bill Mathis of the Springs of Life Giving Water Church. And he's also the director of the Black Church Studies at Yale Divinity School. And he's a board member of Community Healing Network. Community Healing Network. I almost said Community Health Network. So that's why I had to catch myself. But this weekend, the Community Healing Network is starting its weekend, I believe, Friday? Mm-hmm. Why does it show up on my calendar as Thursday? Yep. I don't know. But
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yes. This weekend, they will be holding their Breathe Baby Breathe symposium. And it's really about getting children to heal, as far as the idea of the community deeply driven, possibly genetic, in lieu of slavery, and letting those feelings go, letting that angst go, learning about that angst and what it does to one's being and soul, and how to deal with the feelings that you may have that arise out of that you might not know where they come from. So, Reverend Bill, am I close?
Yes, you are close. This weekend is actually the launch of a global truth campaign that will actually go a little bit all over the world, including the final destination being in Virginia, where slaves first landed here in the Americas, but also encompassing South Africa, in South Africa and in Ghana, as well as in the United Kingdom. But we begin the launch here, which is the birth and home place of Community Healing, that defying the lies and helping people of our community.
When you say defying the lie, talk about what that is.
Well, defying the lie that somehow we are inferior, or somehow that we as Black people or our communities are less than, second-class citizens, not worthy of time or space, not contributors to the world. But more importantly, the lies that we have internalized and began to believe about ourselves and began to act upon. Racism has affected us both consciously and unconsciously. And
whether we want to believe it or not, right?
Right. Many of us who are very gung-ho about our community, who are pro-Black and et cetera, we still have certain kinds of tendencies that abide within us based upon the society and the places in which we were raised and the experiences that was still an area in which we needed to be free. Actually, this is exactly what King said toward the end of his time, and saying that would be the next great battle for our community. And so Community Healing Network came together to kind of defy those lies internally and externally, more so internally, and development of a protocol along with the American Association of Black Psychologists, what we call healing emotional emancipation circles, where we actually deal with those things, both conscious and subconscious outgrowths of racism.
Now, can you give an example of what that might be? Because I think for most people, they say, yeah, okay, but what is that exactly? Are you talking about an emotional state? Are you talking about a mental state? And sometimes, emotional and mental are connected. We understand that. But is there like an example? For instance, I may not like my dark skin. Is that something that you could say is one of the challenges you all see when you sit in that circle? Or is it more to it than that?
I think, yes, on the surface, that could be a prime example of the fact that I feel like I am less than or unworthy because I've been told because of my dark skin that makes me not acceptable, socially acceptable, or that I would have a chance to move up the ladder. And so I do less, sometimes consciously, but oftentimes subconsciously. I don't put myself in positions where I might have the opportunities to advance or to be a contributor to the body of lofty ideas because I didn't come from that. One of the things that when you were talking came to my mind because I grew up in the Deep South. I grew up.
Where'd you grow up?
Albany, Georgia. Where we're praying for
Albany
the rest
State.
Of it. Yep. My family still. I have family still there, and of course the hurricane tornado is going through there, and so we're praying for them.
Yes.
But I grew up in a place where two dirt roads met together. And if I had not had both and teachers and family members and church members who said to me that I had value and that I could achieve and do anything that I wanted to do, it didn't matter that I came from two dirt roads. It didn't matter that I came from the country. It didn't matter that I had a southern accent or that we were segregated and we lived, they call us the river rats. We lived on east side of Albany.
Wow.
Yeah. And so as you grow up, some of that stuff is internalized, and subconsciously we don't put ourselves in positions to advance. And so one of the things that the healing circles do is help us to heal from that. And so when I talk about defying the lies, that's what
that's what you deal with. All right. Also, you're going to be sharing emotional wellness skills to relieve racial stress and trauma. Skills that can be taught to children.
Right. And so this weekend, this launch, which will be kind of like a model for all of the other stops along the global tour. And yes, we do welcome and invite our children, our young people, Generation X, Y, and Z. But we also in particular are focusing on those who are working with our children from our community.
Okay.
So our Black teachers, our Sunday school teachers, our teachers and people who care for and work with children in our community, because some of the things that we see manifested in our young people or have direct links to racism and them not being able to deal with the racism, believing some of the lies and therefore act out
in accordance.
And the trauma exists not just with the children, but also with the adults. And so that's why we want to equip with tools and protocols that could help all of us break the change. In church, we said, break the fetters.
But now, once that's done, what's the follow-up? Because you all are going on tour, so to speak. But how does one follow up with that?
Well, first of all, the Community Healing Network does have a website that provides resources and tools and connection. But one of the primary objectives of the weekend is to establish emotional emancipation circles in various communities. Because that, and there is a protocol, there is substantive materials available for those who will be trained to be facilitators of those healing circles. And so that begins the work in the community, working with children, working with adults, working in particular areas of professions and et cetera, to deal with those particular things that help us to overcome and really crush both the internal, but also to help us to deal with the external racism that we face. And so they'll be equipped to do those circles and seek the benefit of those circles within the community, but also as the circles are operating within that quote unquote microcosm of the community, that then becomes community building. And that community building leads to an agenda of progressive actions and items for the community.
So is that the objective? To really kind of community build?
But to community build so that we take back the narrative for our community and drive it ourselves. we have been, when I say we, an organization here now must be about 7 or 8 years old called the Beloved Community. And there was a time when I was a program director for Project Longevity, which was a combination program between the U.S. Attorney's Office, the state of Connecticut, and the city of New Haven that sought to deal with the extreme violence, in particular those who were violent perpetrators here in the city. And as a result of being involved with that, myself as well as some other colleagues who were working either in nonprofits or kind of were working around that program and said, we should really be driving our own narrative. And so we just started having breakfast and we started having conversations about what we could provide, both from our expertise, but also to leverage our various positions that will provide a progressive agenda and implementation of that agenda for our community. And one of the first things we did when we started meeting was to utilize this tool called the emotional emancipation circles.
Now, how does that work?
Well, there are particular principles of the circle, and we kind of work through those particular principles in the circles. For instance, one of the principles would be kind of like loving yourself and loving who you are. That's simple. And there is a facilitator in the circle who helps us to delve into why do we love ourselves? Why don't we love ourselves? What hinders us from loving ourselves? And because the circle is made up of people who have committed to being in a community with one another, we offer candid and honest kinds of opinions. Again, another thing that often doesn't happen in our community because, again, one of the lies that we've been told is that we're all crabs in a barrel and we are tearing each other. And so in many ways, we defy that lie by developing a community, being honest and candid with each other, and then beginning to deal with the issues that we have among ourselves.
So why is this important? I mean, I know. And certainly you, as someone who is a part of the organization, knows. But how do you explain to others who aren't affected by this the importance of it?
When you say the others who are not
people of color or people of color who think, you know, the whole thing about us being affected by slavery is bunk.
Yeah.
You know, it's just another so-called excuse.
What's the young man named Kanye
West?
Kanye West. I would say to them that I would just take them to our community and tell them to look. And what they see is no different, if different, only incrementally different than what it was 10 or 20 years ago. And I would challenge them to begin to think about why is it that way. And I guarantee you that eventually they would come to the conclusion that it's the systems and structures that we are not driving that causes it to happen. One that comes to mind based upon my background and my experience is the increased number of young black men who spend their 20s and 30s in prison, whether in prison for a long period of time or in and out. By no means do I suggest that it is just simply the system that does it, but the systems and structures does not lend for one who makes a mistake to change and to develop greater. Now, does that system work better for quote unquote the white collective? Absolutely. Because at a young age, they are given breaks and opportunities and go to diversion programs or they're taken home to their mother and father, where we are arrested and eventually find ourselves in the juvenile system, where even in the juvenile system, we have probation officers and we're reporting to probation officers. And then whereas just like any other student or any other young person have some difficulties in school, becomes a violation of that probation. So they become pegged. Then they begin to believe that they will always be that way. And everybody begins to teach them and or to treat treat them as though they're that way. So they began to believe the lie. On top of the fact that as much of the television that they see in the movies that they go to see, they see all of themselves who look like them as thugs and people who've been in the system and who will forever be in the system. And so emotionally and mentally, they have taken on a narrative that somebody else has driven, whether for profit or whether for some other ulterior motive, and therefore they find themselves in the system, etc. And so the systems and structures are the issues. And only way that we can impact the system and structures is that we define what those systems and structures are and what should be their deliverables. That means that we must not just have a seat at somebody else's table. We must develop tables ourselves and begin to develop our own systems and structures.
And have seats at those tables.
Yeah. As much as I'm a preacher, I am saved. I'm saved. I believe that there is one heaven, and that we are all going to go to heaven. But I do believe God created me black, and He created me black for a reason. And He gave me the ability to be fruitful and multiply, not as being someone else, but being who I am, and which is directly related to my community. And He says unto me to replenish, to redress it. He has given me dominion over all things, and I think we should act in that vein. And so what the Community Healing Network does and Emotional Emancipation Circles does is to help us to receive empowerment from within to drive our own narratives.
I just heard a story over the weekend about a young man who, at 13, young black man, shot a white woman. Shot her, threw the gun out, ran back home. Took them about a week to find him. He was jailed for life at 13 years old. And it wasn't that I was stunned, but I was. Because I said, we all do stupid things, you know, and you do less stupid things the older you get. Doesn't, you know, your age does not preclude you from doing stupid things, mistakes, wrong things, right?
No, does your color.
Right. But to jail a boy for the rest of his life was just, and it's, again, it wasn't so much that I hadn't heard of it, but maybe I hadn't heard of it lately.
Yeah, I think, I'm not going to say I think, as again, for a long period of time, I practiced law and was an assistant state's attorney in Baltimore City. And so, and am a person who has researched and wrote around criminal justice and neighborhood safety, especially around race and the impact of race to and from those entities. It happens all the time, but it takes us to hear one or to be in a space emotionally or socially in which it hits home and hits us in the gut and knocks the wind out of us.
That hit me in the gut because, again, here was this young man who made a very bad mistake. The woman survived. And he actually called her and said, will you forgive me? Will you allow me to write you letters as part of my forgiveness? She said yes. And eventually she was not necessarily surprised, but just had never heard of something like this happening. And she worked toward this young man's freedom. So eventually the man comes out of jail and she starts to lobby for him to get jobs, for him to, you know, go back to school, for him to adapt socially. And I know, you know, while that may sound like a common theme, you know, you forgive the person and then the person in turn, you know, you work for that person. It's really not.
Yeah.
It's really not a common theme.
Right.
And the fact that we are still in a space that allows 13-year-old boys to go to jail for life.
2018.
It's just amazing. in this decade.
And in relation to what we're talking about and this equipping that we propose for this particular weekend, we do hope that as many people as possible can come. Just think about how that affected you, and you didn't know him at 13. But think about the people, his friends, his
family,
his family, his church family, and all the people, and how that has impacted their lives, and what decisions and how they think about things, or how they think about the police, how they think about the criminal justice system, all of those that's exactly what we're talking about. Because racism has a malignant kind of power upon it, and it affects us, yes, externally, but more so internally.
Yeah.
And therefore psychologically we won't achieve, we won't do things. I was in Barcelona this summer, and some friends from London met me in Barcelona, and we were staying at two different locations. And so one day we were going out to dinner, and I was going to meet them. And these were people of the African diaspora as well. I was going to meet them, and I said, you know what? I walked over to their place. I stayed in an Airbnb place. They were staying in a hotel, and so I walked from my Airbnb apartment over to their hotel, and they were standing out in front of the hotel. And they said to me, why didn't you call an Uber? And we just picked us up in an Uber. I said, well, I didn't want to call an Uber in a strange place because I'm a black male and it's nighttime. And so I didn't think I would get one.
And even though you're out of the United States.
Out of the United States. But my psyche said, I've got to wait till I'm in front of the hotel in order to call me an Uber.
And then I'm safe.
Because then they think I'm legit, I'm American, all of those kinds of things.
Right.
And that happens with us over and over and over again.
And how did you feel about that?
I felt bad. We talked about it. And I thought, you know what? This is downright silly that I can't even get an Uber, that I think I can't get an Uber from my apartment over into a hotel, that it would probably be more comfortable for the Uber driver if they came pick me up from a hotel as opposed to
where you were.
And so again, back to the 13-year-old and the people around him. Just imagine how that affected them, and how that probably has dampened their ability to be everything they were supposed to be as a result of that. I think racism has that kind of effect.
Yeah, it's a domino effect.
Yeah.
Because it moves through, like you said, families, but a mental death.
It's intentional because that's a way to keep us in line. And watch this. Even those of us who are progressive, our jobs. Well, you know, you can't be a kind of black person who sat on the table and yell and scream about X, Y, and Z, because then they'll never promote you. They will never do anything. You'll never become. And so what we do, we keep quiet.
Yeah.
We can sit in the same meeting about resources, and everybody's very generous to other communities. But they'll give something to black people. We won't speak up and say, well, why? This won't even open the door.
Right. This doesn't assist or affect. And it's because we're not sure. We're never sure.
Right. And, well, we figure I'm inside the door. At least there's somebody here at the table. And so we take the crumbs from the table.
Instead of really saying, okay, look, this is what it is. I need that equal distribution.
Yeah, I one of the things I know that the emotional emancipation healing circles have done for me is help me to face some of my own internal racism.
Which it is supposed to do.
Right. It's exactly what it's supposed to do. But it also made me more bold and courageous around rightness. And particularly rightness around my community.
Yeah.
And the people.
Because I think for so many of us, it's not so much that we fear the opponent or the opposite. the fear is within us, so it's preventative.
Right.
So you may carry the fear and you don't let go of it. And you know, you have to wonder too, is it also a protective thing?
Yeah.
Because like you in Barcelona, it lets you say to yourself, okay, I'm safer this way. I'm in a foreign country. You know, I really don't know anybody. I do have my phone, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that somebody is going to assist me. So, you know, it may be a safety piece.
Yeah. I again, one of our members in our circle tells a story about the fact that for a long time they'll be walking on the sidewalk, and when white people were approaching them, they would move over. Yeah, I mean, not consciously thinking that you just did it, but that's what racism has done to us. And if we don't really deal with that, then we can, as King said, stand up so nobody can ride us anymore.
Right. Well, you know, the other thing about that is too, the white folk don't move.
They won't move.
They don't move. They don't, you know, and it's funny you bring that sort of thing up, and then we'll get back to this. But a good friend of mine and I were discussing how in the past we've sat on boards and might have been one or two people of color or, you know, the one. And you're sitting with these people and you're in a room with them 2-3 hours, right? And you're hashing out stuff and you're planning and somebody's taking notes and you're brainstorming and, you know, you're developing plans, all of these things. And then the next day you see them on the street and they don't recognize you.
That's amazing.
They don't know you. And it's like, okay, so I left the building at 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30 last night. You know, it's not quite 12 hours yet, and you don't know who I
am. And that's another issue that we tend to internalize is they don't really see us.
They don't see us. And we allow them not to see us.
That's it. That's it exactly.
We allow them not to see us because, you know, there have been times when I was like, okay, I don't feel like speaking, you know, and part of that is human nature. But the whole thing of trying to explain where you know me from. Yeah. It's like, you know, I don't, you know, and it's not fear. It might be embarrassment because I have to actually sit up, you know, I have seen the look when I speak to people. Hi, how you doing? And they're like, hi.
You know.
And then, you know, all of a sudden I have to break out the voice and hold, you know, my hand out and say, how are you? This is what, you know, oh, yes. You know, now tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
You know, and there's still some people who still aren't sure who you are. You know, and then when you get back in that boardroom, they're like, you know, you can see the recognition like, okay, yes, I saw you on the street and I remember you being here. And for me, it's kind of too late because I recognize you wherever we are. And it doesn't take me 2 or 3 times to remember. Yeah. So, you know, part of that I think is the fear, the embarrassment, you know, and at the same time, am I acknowledging that I was not good enough for you to know or to remember?
And if we are not well equipped and our self-esteem and self-confidence is not continuously built up, that begins to tear at the fibers of who we are.
Who you are.
And it does cause certain kinds of reactions on our part. I wouldn't say, as some of the Republican senators said, that we become an angry mob, but we become angry to a point that sometimes it can be self-defeating. And in order for us to heal for that, we cannot wait on them to do that.
Well,
we've got to do it ourselves.
Yeah. Well, that was our conversation prior to getting on the air, right?
Yes.
That we keep looking for, although now I think we understand that we're not. And we're beginning to move toward saving ourselves as opposed to waiting for that leader to come along and save us. I mean, you think about the conversations when Obama was president and the fact that, you know, there were Black people who were mad at him because he did not act in certain ways. He did not, people felt like he didn't assist Black people. You know, you on one hand, you had that crowd, and then on the other hand, you had folks who said, well, you know, he's president of all the people. You know, he's president of the United States. He's not president of the Black people of the United States, you know, and people really, and still are, upset with him because they felt like this was an opportunity to right the ship, to make things equal, to give us that level playing field. But I think we, as a people, even though we knew he was the most powerful man on the planet, we saw that he had to sign executive orders because he just could not walk through Congress and pass a law.
I think that's a wonderful example for our viewers to think about this whole idea of emotional emancipation. What if President Obama, maybe one day we will find out when he writes his memoirs from this time in the White House and serving as president, that there were many things he wanted to do and felt the urge to do it and wanted to step out of the boat and walk on water in those particular areas. But because he was Black and because he was the president of the United States, how those two things came into tension and the fear inside, or because of racism and what people say about like for instance, I think they talked about, he did at least talk about this, when him and Hillary were running both in the Democratic primary, he had to be careful how he spoke and the tone of his voice because she was a white woman.
Right.
And how that could have been interpreted. Imagine how many of those kinds of things were internalized inside of him while he was president, and not making any excuse. But maybe that was one of the reasons why he didn't go as far in some particular areas.
In instances.
And now to look back, I'm sure this is I don't know this for a fact now, but I'm sure he got a plenty of earful from Michelle late at night. But I'm sure he must have struggled with that. And those are some of the things that many of us struggle on our jobs, in relation to how we act and what we do. And the most empowering thing is to free yourself from that. And that's what the Healing Circles attempt to do. Again, back to our original thing, defying the lie.
Defying the lie.
That, you know what, you do have a position. That position isn't just because you're Black. It's the right position.
Right. So, the guide for the weekend's events?
Yes. On this weekend, what will happen is on Friday we will gather at Friday, October the 12th, from 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. We'll gather at the Emmanuel Baptist Church that's located at 1324 Chapel Street. And that way we'll be discussing and opening the theme of Clearing the Way for Black Children to Flourish, a workshop for leaders of community-based organizations. And then Friday evening, October the 12th, at 6 p.m. to 8:30 at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, 111 Whaley Avenue, is the Community Healer Awards reception, recognizing local leaders here in New Haven who made outstanding contributions to the global movement for emotional emancipation. And then on Saturday and Sunday, October 13th and 14th, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day at Clifford Beers at 5 Science Park, New Haven. Breathe, Baby, Breathe, a retreat for Black people responsible for Black children.
Now, first of all, I'm intrigued by just that title. But in this retreat, what are you trying to bring forward, and what's the age group of the children?
It's more than just children. It's those who are caring for children, whether they be teachers, whether they be Sunday school teachers, guardians, DSS workers, etc. And the goal is to help one to understand, or at least begin the process of understanding the lies that are impacting your life, and then to equip you with tools to defy those lies.
So, in doing that, and we may have mentioned this way back, but I'm when you're saying defying the lie and you're using other terms, is that to start to not necessarily define what this is, but is it a start to a healing place?
It is a start to the healing place. But again, the area of healing in particular that we're talking about now is not necessarily a physical healing. It's an emotional, psychological healing that many of us don't really want to deal with. And I think that's across the board, but in particular in our community. And as a result of us not dealing with the racism that we have internalized and that has impacted our lives, we tend to believe it. I believe that I can achieve, or I believe that I can only do this. I believe that I'm going to wind up in jail, or I believe that I'm going to be struggling the rest of my life. I don't believe I can go to college. I don't believe I can achieve those kind of things. In each of those particular areas and the more, we can look at the lies that have been told to us by Black people that we don't have it. For many of us who grew up in the segregated South and first went to integrated schools, early on, those integration years, they told us that we were not college material and that we had to devote our attention to vocational education and all of that. That was a lie. But many people succumbed to that because they internalized it. We have been told that what we have to contribute is worthless, and or that nobody would value what we did. And so what they did, they took from us and took credit from it and became millionaires on the cotton gin. All of those kinds of things. There are many, many things, even in this particular era, that they have told us that's not possible. Even in the area of owning our own business, you can't own your own business because Black people don't really support business. And other people won't support business, etc. That's a lie. Does it mean that everybody Black is going to support you? Probably not. But everybody ain't going to support everybody no way. But don't let that keep you from launching and moving forward. You may be the very person who changes the narrative. You cannot sit down in this seat because it's reserved for white people. But Rosa Parks sat in that seat and changed an entire generation of people and direction in which we were going. But transformation, not just in Black people. This became healthy for white people as well.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the whole thing of, I used to always joke because when we first moved here, I used to ride my bike, my neighborhood, ride a bike through the neighborhood, and I saw Eli Whitney's mill. I said, wait a minute, it's the same Eli Whitney? So back then, there was no internet. I had to go and look it up in the encyclopedia. I'm like, he's right down the street from where I live. But the kicker for me was, there's no cotton around here. So how did he come to be king of cotton? I don't understand this, and I went to my parents and they kind of looked at me funny. They said, well, what are you reading? I said, the encyclopedia is telling me that he invented the cotton gin. And he went south on a couple of trips to kind of perfect it. But I don't know when he got to that point. So obviously he had to go back south to see if this thing worked. But that's right down the street from us. There's no cotton anywhere near it. So I said, okay.
I think things like that are extremely important. And thank God for your parents and those who encourage you to question
Yes.
and to learn on your own. One of the dangers that I see, and I think many of us see, is that our children are no longer being educated by us.
Yeah. Well, you
And-
know what? And it's interesting that you say that, because I think there are certain things that folks still aren't learning, or learning in certain ways to, in this area, pass tests to become teachers. That's number one. I think number two, when you start to talk about HBCUs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I went to a state HBCU. I went to A&T in North Carolina.
Yes.
Okay. Biggest one in the state. When I went there, everybody was black. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
From the maintenance staff to the president.
Everybody.
Mm-hmm. In my second year, it started to change. And suddenly we had people of color who were East Indian coming in and teaching engineering classes. And then those young people started to follow, right? Then people who were not of color started to come on our campus. And that's when more and more we started to absorb this thing about, well, you know, they're going to take it. It's going to be integrated, and they're going to call it UNCG West. That rumor still lives. And campus has changed. Now, the state has poured a lot of money into A&T, and it's actually very, very beautiful. It is not the campus that I knew when I arrived there. But at the same time, there are certain things that are ours, that are our traditions, that they're slowly beginning to take away. Yep. And the young people in turn don't know what that means. So we as alumni try to educate people every time we run into somebody. You know, somebody says to us, Aggies do. So no. It's Aggie pride. And they say, yeah, but no. You're being taught something to integrate yourself into this piece that's not really who we are.
That goes to another lie to defy, that somehow HBCUs were not.
Yeah, we were never meant to be good schools.
Good schools and great places. And they would even call, I went to Morehouse undergrad. And so in order for us to have legitimacy, we were the Harvard of the South.
Yes.
As opposed to just being Morehouse, because the lie was, because it was all black, there had to be something wrong with it. They could not be on par with everybody else. But one of the things that I am so grateful, and I'll say this to anyone, people would think and look at my resume and think that Harvard is the jewel in my crown. No, Morehouse College is
a jewel in your crown. Absolutely.
Just one simple thing about the fact that when I was at Morehouse, we didn't have black humanities. We didn't have black courses about general discussion there. We taught humanities. Right. But in humanities, I learned about William Shakespeare, but also learned about Harlem Renaissance alongside the same. Yeah. They were both valued information and things that a person who's well educated ought to know. But you cannot go to a Yale, you cannot go to a Harvard and be in a humanities class where there's the same kind of appreciation for contributions of people of color.
Yeah. Absolutely, because
and so to be honest, I said this in one of my emotional myself. I think maybe I got a superiority complex because I believe I've been better educated because I see the world as a
through
whole.
Through a different lens. Yeah. Because same thing, you know, when I went to school in Boston first, and people tried to walk me down the Ivy Trail, but my math SAT score did not allow me to do any more than what I was doing. But when I transferred schools And, you know, back then it was the book.
Right.
It wasn't, you know, going to see a campus or anything like that. It was that big, huge book that you paid $20 for. And you were like,
Right.
$20. And went, looked in the book, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And when I got there, I was so amazed because, granted, I'm from a black family. My parents are Southerners, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what black people look like. I went to black church, you know, so it wasn't that kind of shock.
Right.
But it was a different culture shock. So I had to learn in that. And, you know, I really believe, like you, I got one of the best educations I possibly could get.
Yep.
And if somebody had told 16-year-old me that was so Wellesley bound, was going to Wellesley, you know, I would have looked at you like you were crazy. I learned about Moliere.
Yeah.
Very rarely now, he's Francis Shakespeare. Very rarely now do you see things that are performed, Moliere pieces. They did one at Yale, not Yale Rep, Long Wharf a few years ago. I tore over because I loved him. I tore over there. I'm the only black person in the whole theater. And everybody's looking at me like, and because of what I did at the time, I had front row seats.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and I am loving this. And I'm saying to my friends, you want to come there? Like, well, who's he? I'm like, he's the black Shakespeare. You know, I mean, he's the French Shakespeare. But that, you know, again, you're told this thing, right? And you're told that this is not the place that you should have an education.
Right. And
Because
so
it's black. So you're not going to get what you would get elsewhere.
And so we're put into a system which kind of excludes us, our history, our contributions on the same level as white people. And so it reinforces this narrative that somehow we're second class, that we're not as good and not as ready. Because how could you be in 2018 and your people ain't made a major contribution that you just ain't won a Roman numeral on the outline of the syllabus? And one of the, I want to say, a great shout out to my niece, Kirsten. She said to Uncle Billy she wanted to go to Spelman. Right, young lady. It could go and do anywhere in none of the other schools, etc. But she wanted to go to Spelman. And she wrote me a card and she said she wanted to thank me. One, after she got there, there had been a weekend orientation, or you can be a quarter in the forum of Marston Spelman. But she wanted to think that, that somehow I played a part in helping her to arrive at that decision. I ain't made a decision. I wanted her to go, but I wanted her to arrive at that decision. Because I wanted her to be understand. As well prepared as she possibly can when she goes on to graduate professional school about who she is. And because of who she is and the color of her skin, that it did not make her less than anybody. But actually, she ought to walk in thinking that she can go toe to toe with anybody. And I'm grateful for that. And I think that defies a lie, what they've said.
You're listening to the show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We're streaming live on TuneIn Radio and NewHavenIndependent.org. We're also streaming live video on Facebook Live. Just go to Facebook.com/New Haven Independent, or just go to your own Facebook page and look us up. We are in the studio. The Community Healing Network is about to have their weekend clearing the way for Black Children workshop, Breathe Baby Breathe retreat. And it is the 2018-2020 Global Truth Campaign and Tour. In the studio with me is board member. Don't tell me. Wait a minute. I didn't get my credentials right here. Because we've been engaged in wonderful conversation. I hope that you can understand where we're coming from. The Reverend Bill Mathis. He is the pastor of Springs of Life Giving Water Church, which is at the corners of Howard and Lamberton in New Haven. and he is also the director of Black Church Studies at the Yale Divinity School, and he's a board member for the Community Healing Network. And once again, I thank him for coming in this afternoon / evening. So you all are really, truly going throughout the country. You have several stops.
Yes.
Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, New York, Richmond, Kingston, Jamaica, Johannesburg, South Africa, and Ghana, West Africa. Now, you mentioned earlier, 2019, you're going to be in Richmond during observances of the 400th anniversary of the first recorded forced arrival of Africans in the United States. You all are going agenda. What do you want to see?
Well, we want to see this strategy and model of emotional healing from the trauma, from the lies, from racism be a part of the network of empowerment within communities of color, communities, in particular communities of Africa and the African diaspora, as a part of the working of the strategy and the agenda toward liberation and freedom for our people. And so it's in the area of Black churches, it's in the area of the public square, whether it's around social movements, economic movements, political movements, etc., that all of us should be integrating as a there is, I can't help but to be a preacher. There's a great story of Ness, who are Joseph's children. Interesting, Joseph spent all this time in Egypt, married an Egyptian woman. His children obviously were part Egyptian. Well, we also think that Joseph lived out in the desert in the middle of the hot sun, so they wasn't. And they said unto Joshua, the lot that you have given us is not enough. And so, and they say unto Joshua, we are a great people, and we should have more. And Joshua said, well, if you're a great people, then get up into the hill country and clear the land for you. They respond to Joshua saying, well, the hill country is inhabited by giants and is inhabited by armies with chariots, and we are kind of like grasshoppers. Any military scientist will tell you that if you're going to war with people who are giants or people who were chariots, and you're on a hill country in the context of the time and the space in
we
which
got
they
30
were
seconds.
Where they were, was such that it was cluttered with trees and big trees and etc. They had no chance against them. But because we were scared in our minds, fear defeated us. We didn't even take the chance to go clear the land. We are great people, and we have opportunity to clear the land and possess which is rightfully ours.
If you want more information, go to communityhealingnet.org. We thank the good Reverend for coming in and joining us and letting us know all about this particular event. Reverend Bill Mathis, I thank you. I appreciate you being here today.
Certainly, I am happy to be here. We look forward to everyone joining us Friday from 8:30 to 12:30 at Emmanuel Baptist Church, 1324 Chapel Street. On Friday, October 12th, 6 to 3, beers at 5 Science Park. You're all all people of the community of Africa and the African diaspora are welcome. Thank you. It was a wonderful